Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Um, I would like to firstly express my gratitude to our partners from the Network of African Data Protection Authorities, NATPA, were able to swiftly respond and coordinate for this event. I want to also acknowledge government representatives and regulators who are amongst us. The representatives from our various Network of African Data Protection Authorities, international organizations, and the internet governance ecosystem. Welcome to this, our session, where we'll be sharing knowledge on data governance and going through some trainings, as my colleague Krista has mentioned, on data governance innovation with a focus on data protection and privacy. On behalf of Director General and CEO of Smart Africa, Mr. Lasina Kone, it is truly an honor to be with you this afternoon. I'm happy to share that Smart Africa's vision is to transform Africa into a single digital market by driving Africa's digital transformation agenda. To achieve this vision, we are working on various continental digital projects with the support of our partners, and these include cybersecurity, cloud and data centers, the Smart Africa Trust Alliance, and of course the Smart Africa Digital Academy, which has facilitated our presence here. Data governance is amongst these ongoing activities, which is a prerequisite for us to realize the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Digital Single Market. I mentioned that we work very closely with various partners so that we are able to achieve this ambitious goal. So as far as data protection and privacy within Smart Africa, we've worked with stakeholders, including our partner NATPA, and with the support of some of our partners, GIZ and now the World Bank. In 2021, we developed guidelines for data protection and privacy for Africa. And the landscape on data governance is continuously evolving in Africa. We've worked with Ghana and Senegal to support them to develop their national data strategies. And it's been 2 years now since we signed our MOU with the Network of African Data Protection Authorities. I just want to highlight the objectives of our meeting here so that I can quickly hand over to Dr. Chooks. So we want to gain insights into key laws and regulations at the national and continental level. These include the Malabo Convention and of course on an international level the GDPR. We also want to see where this intersects with the African Union data protection, the African Union continental framework. So we also want to discuss the impact of regulations on businesses and examine the role of emerging technologies in data management. We also want to highlight the critical functions of data protection authorities in ensuring compliance and how we can foster collaboration between the stakeholders. So some of the key questions that we'll be asking is, as we implement data protection laws, what should we put into consideration around innovation, data value creation, and building trust and equity? How do we ensure that the regulations we put in place promote innovation and competitiveness of African firms? How do we also ensure that our DPAs are well resourced and they can effectively enforce protection and privacy regulations, but at the same time find the sweet spot to support innovation within our own systems and processes? And then one of the major areas is research and knowledge projection. And we're going to have best practice sharing at the national level and also at the regional level with some of our colleagues here. I just want to end by thanking our partners from the World Bank, the Network of African Data Protection Authorities, and the GIZ for supporting this engagement, and our esteemed trainers and experts who are amongst us taking the podium shortly. Thank you very much. I wish you fruitful deliberations and an enriching session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe just later as well. We're going to have a Q&A, so questions and answers, but also any feedback that we have. I know Aretha just presented the work that has been done in the past, but also moving on forward. So without any further delay, I'm going to welcome our representative from NATPA, which is the Network of African Data Protection Authorities, Mrs. Suhalia, who's going to represent the NATPA before we move forward into the training with Dr. Chooks. Thank you so much. And I would like to also highlight just a little bit, as we have mentioned, this is a knowledge sharing, so we're hoping to also have interaction or interactive session towards the end. With also an introduction that with what Aretha just mentioned of data protection, we're also building what we call a community of practice into different areas. So we would like to also stay in touch in terms of who do we have in the room, so that we can also develop the next knowledge sharing sessions that we have with the different decision makers, regulators. It's a project that's going to be ongoing for the next 5 years. So we hope to stay in touch. There's going to be passing around a small notebook with the names. Feel free to put the names if you don't want to share the contacts. That's okay. But we would also happy and organization that you'll be connecting from. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mrs. Tualia.
So, hello everybody. My name is Mrs. Souhaila Shawi. I'm from CNGP Morocco. I'm representing the NATPA. NATPA is a African network of DPA, Data Protection Authorities. It was created in 2000 at Ouagadougou, due to an idea that was developed in Dakar before. So the network is composed by 23 member, 23 countries members, official members, and 3 countries. So there is a board in the network. The board is composed by the president, which is the Niger, the first vice president, which is Kenya, the second vice president, which is Angola, and then we have the permanent secretary, which is Morocco. The Morocco Secretariat since 2018. And we have a lot of working groups that are working on different topics and different teams. We have like internal governance of the network, capacity building, data protection in AI and other emerging issues, identity management, and we have also regulatory harmonization, and last but not least, international cooperations. The next General Assembly will be held in Nigeria, and the network has signed a memorandum with the Smart Africa that wish to develop. It was signed at Dakar, and we hope that our relation with Smart Africa as the network, African network. And we are really delighted today to be here with you. Hope this exchange and this seminary will be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Suhalia. So without now any further delay, I think we have been seeing a presentation on data governance from Dr. Chooks with the different members that are presented in the room and organization. If I may welcome Dr. Chooks, and I believe now we're going to start taking notes for any questions, inquiries, feedback, thoughts that we might have. We're going to take them right after the presentation. So thank you so much. Dr. Chooks, if I may give you the hand. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you to Smart Africa and the colleagues. Thank you to everyone for the invitation. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, good. I'll move around a bit so I can see the stage quite a bit more and see my slide. So I'll be speaking around some issues today. Introduce myself briefly. I know some of the people in the audience already. I don't have a monitor yet, so let me move around a bit so I can see as well what I'm presenting. So we'll look at data. You can see the focus is on data, but I put it in brackets so that we can also expand, go a little bit bigger into that. But the idea really is there's one question I'm trying to answer today. What are we going to do in terms of governance in a way that really achieves transformation? So I come from the science, technology, and innovation background, so I will provide some experience of how that has been happening in that field before we come today. So governance is not new. We all know it's not new. It's not a new concept. We are governing countries. We're governing systems. A transition, so many type of governance happening. So here we'll focus a little bit more on the digital, which is a broader space, and then data within that included. So what is the background? Just to show, I've seen some colleagues were together not long ago, a couple of months. I've seen some together okay, yes. I don't know whether they hear me. Hello, is this better? Okay, thank you. He's saying this is better. Okay, so I've seen some colleagues that were just saying we're together earlier this year, working on the same topic. So what do I do? A bit of background. I'll put some of the publications there, some materials we worked on. It's not about self-promotion, but to give you the background that we've been working on this again, both in theory but also in practice. Like I said, some colleagues were with me earlier this year in Zanzibar, where we were doing some of this work together. So we look at, I'm based in two places. Just first of all, to introduce, you can see, let me try to find the pointer. So I'm based at University of Sussex, part-time. The pointer is going a different place, but also at the University of Pretoria, where I wear two hats, okay? I'll get the pointer. Okay, so it's reflecting there on the side, but I'll show you here. Anyway, I won't use the pointer much. So just to show that I wear two hats, one at the University of Pretoria, where I'm a professor for transformative innovation and research there, work at the GS, at the Graduate School of Technology Management. And then the second position is at University of Sussex in the UK, Science Policy Research Unit, where I'm a senior research fellow. What we have been doing, the areas of focus you can see, for those who have followed my work, we worked a lot on data, digital governance, but technology, innovation, science, and policy. So I'm going to come from the innovation background to then bring us forward towards where we were. Similar works we have done in this area. I'll focus on two examples. The two examples being what we've done at the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, just to give background, and then the arm of that is the Africa Hub. So this is one of the way we've been. This is two examples I said I'll give. This is a work we've been doing with the European Commission, how to connect science, technology, and innovation towards development. Ultimately, data, governance, privacy, everything we're talking about is to achieve development impact. So how do you actually align? Okay, so the questions I'm posing now using innovation is the same question we're going to be asking on data. So how do we align science, technology, and innovation for development? You can replace the STI with data. You can replace it with digital. So how do we actually align data? How do we align digital for development impact? So this is a question. And then in order to do that, governance comes into the frame. So ultimately, data is not for data, digital is not for digital, STI is not for STI, science, technology, innovation. They are for something, they are inputs. So this is where governance comes in, because what we're trying to do to govern the system is to actually help make them do what we want them to do. So this is one example. Another example, as you can see here, is work. I got a bottle of water. I forgot it somewhere. Another example. Thank you. I was sure I took one. So another example, this is a recent work we're doing with UNIDO. UNIDO is trying to build 3 labs globally, one in Asia, one America and one in Africa. So at the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium tier, at the Africa which I direct, what we're trying to do is this: how do you infuse science, technology, and innovation into industrialization? So again, similar question we need to ask around data. Do we know the countries who are doing well? We know the Amazons, how they're using data. Are they using that for development, for industrialization? The biggest country, how funding, how a lot of work progress now happening is from this area. So how do you actually do that? So I'm posing the questions now, but very soon I'm going to also ask you to, I'm going to ask some question or make you respond to some question. So this is what we're doing. We know what the challenges are around many of the global south or less developed country, whatever terminology you use, mainly Asia, Latin America, and Africa. The question they're asking really is, how do we industrialize? Do we industrialize towards the same direction the global north have done, or do we change a different approach, or do we leapfrog? So these are some of the questions. Again, there's data-driven this work because it's science and technology and innovation again. So where do we go from here, okay? Trying to get my click to work. Okay. Can you go to the next slide for me? I don't see a light here. I don't think. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Oh. No, next one. Okay, so this is where we are now. We're now looking. You can see what I'm going to cover now. One of the questions is really to from the program of the forum. You can see the direction and following the sequence. So how do we go from harnessing innovation, science, technology, innovation, and then towards digital? So that is the first question on the left. Let's see here. And then on the second one, you can see the second one, contribution to peace. I'll cover that within the social and aspect of digital. And then on the third one, we're looking at issues of rights and inclusion. Again, you can see that brings in social innovation. But then on the final part, you can then we then build into governance. So we're going from innovation, which is economic growth in the framework how we use, and then towards the second part, which is a bit more on the social and environmental side, inclusion side. The two second bullet point, and then that. So what is going to be covered is where are we now? What are we trying to do? What is the major innovation? So what is the problem we're trying to address? What do we need to govern? Why do we need to govern? I think these are important questions before we then go into how to govern or what to govern. And the why is very important. There has been lessons from, like I said in the beginning, there's been lessons from the innovation system governance, and how science, technology, innovation institutions have been governed. And then there's also then what approach do we take? So the third component will begin to look at the kind of approach we take in how to deliver this. And then the conclusion would then be what we heard now, and what is the next way, what are the next steps, what is the policy research agenda, and the concluding steps. Okay, so where we are now, I'm speaking on behalf of Smart Africa here on invitation. So I'm going to be using examples from Africa a lot. So apologies, that's not yet, just bring context back to where we are. So if we take a question, I don't know how people can input into the discussion because you're all on the headphone, maybe you can answer, but what are the pressing challenges we're trying to address? You can also answer globally. So what are the pressing challenges? Just 2 or 3 people can just give a feedback. Yes. Digital literacy was okay. What else? Because it's important to align what we're trying to govern with a specific challenge. Okay. This is also a workshop, so it's not supposed to be too much of a lecture teaching. So please, let's make it a bit interactive so that I don't talk for 50 minutes. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe proper data connectivity.
Connectivity. Okay. Okay. Connectivity into one more and then I move on. Yeah, yes. Which is balance. That row, this row, and then this column as well. Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Maybe I'm not using my headphone. Can everyone else? Okay. Go again? No, 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 no. Sorry, we'll get the technologies right. Yeah,
Am I audible? Super.
yes.
I was saying I'll probably restate what the others have said.
Yeah.
Digital transformation with the increased connectivity, data governance, regulation implementation, more energy for our citizens. I'm talking about Africa, building infrastructures.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lot. So the point is, there is a lot we're trying to do, and time is not on our hand. Again, like I said, I'm using Africa for this contest because speaking again about on behalf of Smart Africa, there is already a direction we want to go. So a lot of the work we do now on innovation study, there's a terminology we call directionality. There's already a long-term direction we want to go that has been outlined. You can see it on the figures on the left. It's the issues that we want to cover. Prosperous Africa is right on the top. So if I look at prosperity, that means economic growth. That is prosperity. So we see economic growth on the top. Then we look at political unity. This is a long-term direction. It's not just on digital. It's everybody. So if this is the direction we want to go, as we see here, we have peace, of course, peace, which we involve data protection and many other things within security. Strong cultural identity. We see issues of values, ethics, which we'll cover again in data. And then, so if we take all of this one on the agenda, there's a question. Just one question again. How will data help us get to this? How do we govern data? How do we govern digital to help us get to that? So the question we've been answering on the innovation side is how does science, technology, and innovation contribute to that? So the idea here is the legal theme, everybody, different sectors. We then really need to think back. If this is a direction we're going, we have many directions. Again, if we expand this, we have the SDG, sets a direction where we want to go. So the question becomes, how do we use data? How do we govern data? How do we govern digital differently? What is the problem, the way we're governing that may not take us here? So those are the kind of things we need to think. So if this is direction, if we take each of them, then we can do that. And then on the right, you can see again the context we have. Young population needing jobs, which connects to prosperity straight away. Economic growth, industrialization, high unemployment, we want to address inequality. Agenda 2063 is there. I will come back to the G20, which South Africa has just launched and is heading G20 now. Some priorities, again, have been set. If you look at the priorities, you see it connects to what we're doing. Issues of climate change, high impact, low-income countries, Africa contributing less, but having more impacts in climate change. Somebody mentioned transformation there. But also beyond, despite all these challenges, we still have vibrant innovation ecosystem happening. The digital sector is working, is producing a lot of unicorns, as we know, for those who are there, and the digital ecosystem is thriving. So there is work. So this is on the left where we're going. These are the things on the right that we need to address. So again, the question is, what are we governing now? Is the way we're governing, is it going to help us address this one? Okay, so just to bring, I mentioned the G20, just to give one example, which is recent as well. This was launched, this is the president's speech last week. It's not up to 2 weeks yet. You can see the key points there is that the climate change crisis is worsening. We know that. Natural disaster under development, inequality, poverty, which we'll come back to later, data privacy and issues of that. But on sustainable debt as well. So how do we actually use data and digital govern it differently to help us achieve economic growth that reduces debt for Africa and for global south. It's stifling. It's really on the neck of some of the countries. And then a need for energy transition, sustainability, and harnessing. So these are the questions innovations community's been asking. So if you look at the science, technology, and innovation, you can look at the T as part of the digital we're talking. And then there are three deliverables that have been outlined. Again, the number one is inclusive economic growth. So again, back to the same question, how are we going to govern data differently to really promote economic growth while we look at other components? The second part is food security. That's where we have. I don't know, I've had the discussions with many in the continent. I mean, how can the continent not be able to feed itself now? There's a question. So what is the data? How do we govern data for agriculture, data for food systems that actually can help achieve these three? So we can reduce everything into three directions. We call them directionality. We want to go to the direction of no hunger of food security. How do we get there with data? What role does data play? What role does digital support us? And then the last is, again, data governance mentioned, very, very point blank. So connects to work you're doing. Is going to be a major agenda where the world is going to coalesce around this area. So really, so our direction is clear. The question is, what do we need to get there? So these are the priorities we have. Not just, I mentioned debt a little bit. There is this report you saw, you can see here. It was published very recently, last week or so, or 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks ago. Developing countries spending 1.4 trillion just to service debt. Again, what do we do with it? What does data help us in this area? These are the issues we're dealing with. And many of these countries are African countries. 1.4 trillion paid to developed countries. So these are the pressing challenges. So if we don't get this context properly, then maybe the way we govern data then shift. The priority shifts. The priority to some of the area we're not. My clicker stopped. Okay, so that's again the same in another way. I'm trying to emphasize, build a case for why the governance of data need to shift a little bit from what we're already doing now. Look at statistics from our Agenda 2063. Is 2010 data, but you can see where some countries are going and where the rest are going. Again, this links to the economic growth we're talking about, aspect of data governance. How do we govern data now to actually change this kind of dynamics? Because if the growth remains stunted, then there's more borrowing, more challenges for this is material. This is sourced from Africa again. So these are the things. So what do we know? What do we know on how technology has been governed? Because we're now going into data and digital governance. But we've been governing science, we've been governing technology, we've been governing innovation all this while. What have we learned from that? Please keep giving me a point. I didn't set my time, so I still have a long. I may jump some slides. There's a lot to talk about, but once they give me a pointer, then I'll see. So there is a lot we have learned already before now, so that we don't make it sound like we're reinventing the wheel. Learning. There's a lot of lessons. We've been governing systems in universities. We've been governing technology policies since before the World War I, World War II, and then it became even more after the World War II, when it was clear that the countries with more technology power were able to succeed, and that raised a lot of governance issues. So and then within all this period, data has also been collected. Data has been collected all this while. What have we been doing? There's been policies in the US since 1970s on data, on privacy, on ethical issues. Academia has been doing ethics issues and privacy issues for long. So there's a whole range of lessons on how this has been done. So what then needs to change is maybe what wasn't done well, we improve on them rather than throw everything away and try to rethink them at scratch. So, however, we know that the countries with science, technology, and innovation are the most developed ones. They've made more economic growth. So, in the same process that science, technology, innovation is resulting in a lot of profit, there's also social problems, which is the focus of this one, has been growing. the ethics part, the privacy part, has been growing. So here we are now transferring some of those negative results from STI into digital. I have a slide. In the next slide is a bit dense. I'm pressing this guy, it's not working. Can you change to my next slide? This is or maybe it's the battery that needs to change. Okay, so this is dense. I won't go through everything, but you can see that even while we're the lessons from a science, technology, and innovation space, which is digital, is already included, and data, you can see some of the lessons we've been learning. The way governance has worked has meant that there's been skills. The first person that talked about skills. There's been skills, digital skills. Skills have not been matched with industry a lot. There's been mismatch between industry, the way we've been governing innovation systems so far, which is the first point that came out there, skills. So these are some of the gaps we've been noticing. And then we've also noticed a lot of capacity issues. Most times you can have not research, but industry is not able to take them up. So we have a lot of data in Africa, but if industry is not able to use them, then they can't actually deliver what they want. We have of Amazon, Facebook, they are driven by data. So data could be available, but if there's no proper framework for people to actually absorb, which is what we call absorptive capacity, to use them, then they may not produce products or services from it. Then we've also been noticing a lot of weaknesses between the linkage between academia and industry in the current approach. So these are some of the gaps without going through all of them. Infrastructure was mentioned by the lady in the middle. A lot of infrastructure. There's now digital public infrastructure, all kind of infrastructure being discussed. There's also a lot of, so how do we govern infrastructure? Data, not just data infrastructure. There's data infrastructure, there's physical infrastructure, there is also digital infrastructure. It needs to be governed differently if we're going to do that, because the current arrangement we have been governing in the global south especially is that research infrastructure has been weak to support the research that is actually we need to address the challenges we have. So these are some of them. These are the lessons we've learned or some of the gaps we have. Now the approach we take in governing data needs to reflect these ones. I'll come back to one of them, which is silos and fragmentation. Underline the number 4. Underline number 4, for example. We'll come back to policy, where we have so many policies already, but the complaint everybody comes back to is they're not implemented. So how do we use data to drive policy making differently? So these are the issues that actually we need to then put into governance. Because if we ask the right question, then we also we develop the right assumptions, and then we can actually address them. So the governance and coordination, there's been a lot of silos. I'll come back to that later. But currently, the way data and the digital ecosystem is governed, we have people setting up policy for data, policy for AI, policy for blockchain, policy for this, all of them. This is what the problem we have in STI, in innovation studies, for 50, 60 years. These are the problems we've had. And it's already been transferred into data governance. So how do we not do that? How do we change that? Because we create silos and then we try to bring them together later. So again, what do we do differently so that we don't look at data, AI, this one and that, and then later we see they don't talk to each other, and then we have again silos, because that is the problem we had, how science is governed, and then we struggle to get from science to research, get from science that is produced to the industry to use. So that's the kind of silos we're saying. Again, I won't go through all of them, so let me run through that. Again, just building the case. Can you change? There is IPR mentioned and other points mentioned. Can you change? Okay. So I'm looking there now and it's changing. So one of the things we've been trying to do, this is a consortium of different countries, UK, US, 12, 15 countries set up there, where we're looking at this kind of case, again from the STI. So the community of practice you've been hearing, it will be doing something similar to this. How do you bring people who really want to think or rethink data governance in a way that does not addresses the challenges I've raised in the last slide? So this is a community of practice that looks at from the STI side. Okay, okay, and say now. So I'll jump these ones quickly just to see these are the issues we're trying to do. So we have a whole range of countries looking at how do we rethink the way science, technology, and innovation actually works, so that we can have transformation. Again, we'll define transformation later, but what kind of transformation? The SDG is a transformation agenda. It's trying to say, let's govern this differently. Let's think differently. Let's go in a way that doesn't actually addresses transformation challenges. Okay, the kind of difficulties, the kind of challenges outlined in the SDG. So here, two ways. One transformation in one way in this talks about the long-term, changing the systems in place that actually stops some of the difficulties we have. And the other one is around addressing the kind of challenges articulated in the SDG. So I'm going to run, these are some of the work we've done. I won't go through this again, but in a nutshell, this applies to data, because we're saying if you want to achieve the directions I was mentioning, there are some directions that have been set up in the Agenda 2063. No longer to do that, terminology we use that you need to change some systems. Socio-technical systems change on the board. If I explain it just briefly, you can give people food or provide housing, which is an impact. You have done something, but you have not changed the system, underlying system that stops them from getting a house themselves. So that is what we mean by socio-technical change. There are systems that you actually need to change if you want long-term impact. Otherwise, you can get short-term impact, which is good. So we can govern data in a way that gives us some quick results, but we have not changed the underlying system that actually stops us from harnessing data properly the way we want to harness them. So this is, again, something to take in. I won't go into this. Is a different policy. One of the things we're looking at is on regulation. And there's a reason why we've been having difficulties in regulations not working. And many of us know them. Yeah, there's many regulations, many policy. But again, in innovation discourse, it used to be this way, where you invest on R&D. The frame one was you invest a lot in R&D. And then after that, you go to connecting the systems to work. But we saw that there is a problem in this one and the second frame. So maybe we'll revisit the regulations later, but there are many gaps, many weaknesses in regulation. That means people can flaunt them or don't use them. So without going into, so the frame 3 thinking now is really changing the systems, underlying systems that actually make things possible on a long term and impact. So what systems are governing the data arrangement that we currently have? And how do we achieve short-term impact now, but much more long-term system change? I will skip this one. This is what the socio-technical system mean. I'm just going to say I won't talk about the theory behind it. So if you replace research with SCI and data, you can actually use data to drive innovation, and then economic growth happens, which is happening now. Okay, so we can have data, use data which we have in Facebook is doing that, Amazon is doing that, economic growth happens. But that doesn't mean it translates down to what we want. So we can see how, there's a question. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Since you started, you keep saying if we replace STI by data, but I feel like if we only replace it with data, it will be static, and I'm not sure we'll have the change or maybe data analysis or something, but not only data. So I disagree with your statement.
So that's the point I'm making, that how do we govern it differently? So because we're saying the difficulties we have from STI is already showing in the digital field. We're carrying the same problem along. So there's a lot of things that we need to change. So we can't do that. Otherwise, it's going to produce all those problems I showed before. The long list of no connection, data not being used for economic growth. What is happening now is people are replacing it. That's what I'm saying. So they put in data there. We get innovation. We get a lot of economic growth. Facebook, Google, everybody. It doesn't mean it's trickling down. We're still having bad environment. So data and digital itself does not lead to a better environment on themselves. So you need to drive it. Also, you also have more social problem. So there is still more concentrated in a lot of hands, which is inequality, which is the social and societal challenges. So that's the approach. Now, what we're saying is, how do you actually use, so the new thinking will be, how do you use data to actually confront social problems directly, rather than to think that by having data, we produce good, we produce innovation, and then economic growth will happen, which is good. That's a linear thinking, but it doesn't mean we're going to have less social problems. It doesn't mean we're going to have a better environment as well, SDG. So I'm being a chance to conclude. So, and my pointer is again not working. Okay, so I won't go to all this. So I'll go through the conclusion part of it just to show. We'll share this, talk about that. So there's a lot of them small things. We'll have so many of those material. So just to conclude on this one, okay. So that's the question we're asking, what you're saying, madam. So how should we govern it? We cannot just replace data with STI, no, because this is what has happened that has led us to a lot of economic growth. We have companies that are $1 trillion now, we know, but it doesn't mean the trickle down is working. It doesn't mean we're having less social. It doesn't mean distribution is happening. So how do we change that? So in thinking of that, again, this was to show that we made that, we've covered this. So ideally, what we're trying to say is there is economic growth, there's data governance, but we need to look at the 3 dimensions differently. So we need to look at the 3 dimensions differently. However, the 3 will need to be carried along. Otherwise, we're going to have the same problem that we. So this is a workshop provocation, mostly provocation. So we can, when we discuss, there's a lot more material on this slide. I can conclude, yeah? I'm being chased to conclude, but okay, we won't go into that now. We won't go into that, but let's leave it on this slide. There's more material to conclude. I'll hand over to Krista.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chooks. And I think, as we said, it's meant to be a knowledge sharing and capacity building, which is why we've said this is just a launch of the launch track. Okay. It's just a launch of what we need to do next, and hence we also need to keep this going. This is just a beginning to the roadmap that we need to establish when it comes to capacity building. Now, moving on next, thanks to Dr. Chooks, we wanted to share now a national perspective on the sharing of open data policy. And as I've said, I think we have a number of countries in the room, but we also wanted to hear from Kenya, which has been successful into this implementation, to hear from that before we move into now looking at the regional economic community from ITCO. Thank you so much. Allow me to kindly welcome Dr. John from Kenya. You're welcome.
Can you hear me? Okay. I can't hear myself. It's very strange. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, my name is Mr. John Walubengo. I am the Deputy Data Commissioner at the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. So basically, the Data Protection Authority. I'm happy for the invite to share the Kenyan experience on open data, our journey, challenges and opportunities. Towards the end, I will be able to, perhaps for those who are more on the data protection side, try to connect the role of data protection authorities within the broader data governance or open data space. Okay, trying to move. Prof, how did you move it? Oh, next, please. Yeah, so our journey in Kenya on open data started a while back. More than 10 years ago, we had the Open Data Initiative in Kenya by the then President Mwai Kibaki. This was largely pushed by a very should we say, zealous permanent secretary, then Professor Bitange Demo, who wanted or was fully bought onto the idea of open data and how it can help us grow, or how it can be used for socioeconomic development. Sorry, before you move on. But when he left office, the energy and the push for open data sort of lost the momentum. Currently, the site is still on, but it doesn't have what we call cross-ministerial support. So the data is not organically coming from the ministries. Instead, it seems to be sort of collected from the National Statistics Office. Whenever they publish statistical data, then that is being used to populate the Open Data Initiative. Next, please. Yeah, so in terms of opportunities, there's a there's a report from WDR team. This is basically the development partners who came up with a report on how open data can help drive socioeconomic development. So if you look at this diagram, let me see if I can get the pointer. Okay, so at the top you have the civil society, you have the government organizations, and the private sector. So when you talk about open data, these are the key players. Most open data opportunities obviously start or tend to concentrate on government, making public sector data open, which is, of course, I would say perhaps 70% of the problem sorted, if that were to happen. However, there's also critical data that is outside the hand of government. If you think about mobile operators, they've got a lot of data that could also be used for socioeconomic development, but it's not open. Okay, so civil society also has data. We have a lot of NGOs working in the health sector, agricultural sector, that has a lot of, timely and relevant data that they come across in course of their work. That data also could contribute to the pool of open data if it was harnessed. So these are the three key players when you think about open data and how they can synergize their data set so that they avail it for socioeconomic development. Each of these players look at data differently. I think Prof has mentioned for private sector, the big tech, they look at data purely from a commercial point of view, and they have a right to do that. The government, on the other hand, may not have a profit motive, but they will look at data from a point of informing better government policies. So if you are government, you're not going to open data to sort of make money out of it. You're more or less going to open data so that it can allow you to make better policies going forward. Civil society will be more interested in open data in terms of making entities more transparent, more accountable. Next, please. Okay, with respect to Kenya, what were our challenges then? And to some extent even now. I'd already mentioned we depended so much on one individual to push the agenda. And then that creates what we call a single point of failure. When that individual leaves, the project gets orphaned. And pretty much that's what happened in Kenya. The ministries, whether education, health, transport, would contribute data to the open data portal when that individual was in office. But as soon as they left, then there was no more incentive to participate in that project. Also, there was no linkages with the private sector civil society. So it was a purely government initiative, and that means you miss out on the contribution from the private sector. I always give the example of Safaricom. They've got the largest number of customers or subscribers in Kenya. They almost a monopoly. So they have data points on each and every, well, a good 90% of Kenyans. And that data they come across in line of duty, trying to provide service. But then there's secondary data, for example, that Safaricom could share with, say, Ministry of Transport with relation to traffic jams in Nairobi. Because each individual that is holding a cell phone is generating signals back to Safaricom. Those signals can give Safaricom a pretty good picture of traffic congestion in urban centers. This is to say that private sector has public sector solutions, but because there's no mechanism to share that data, then we miss out on those opportunities. In Kenya also, we had early successes in terms of setting up the data servers, getting initial data sets from collaborating ministries. But as I mentioned earlier, once the individual left, the mechanisms of keeping that data timely, relevant, and a continuous pipeline for the same wasn't there. The other challenge, of course, is once the seed funding dries up, again the project fails. So there's need to ensure that governments are able to own the project. And in terms of owning the project, that means you must get funding from National Treasury. Even if there's development partners coming in, but you should have, at a very bare minimum, operational costs covered by yourselves. In terms of running the systems, paying salaries for the civil servants running the project, etc. Next, please. Okay, I like this diagram because it tries to give an analogy of data governance from a library perspective, because most data interventions tend to look at the library ecosystems in isolation. So you'll have, for example, a project on data, in this case the books, but you will not perhaps think broader in terms of the infrastructure, the planning, where will the books sit? Who will contribute to the books? How will you maintain the books? How will the books be shared out? How are you going to share the data? So at the very top, we need the big picture. In most cases, a national data strategy or a national data policy that is able to provide a framework for all the three players I mentioned: the private sector, the government, civil society, how they can contribute to the national data ecosystem. Now, once that is done, then each of the players should be able to maintain their data sets as they contribute to the broader national data ecosystem. There's usually what we call the metadata. Sorry, just go back. I'm still on the library. The metadata is very similar to the library catalog. If you can go back, please. Okay, that's concluding. So if you think about a library that has 1 million books, it becomes a nightmare to get a particular edition or a particular title. Not unless the librarian has a centralized system where you can quickly check and locate the book. So that's basically what a catalog or a metadata is all about. So some initiatives would focus on, let's give Kenya a national data strategy. And then they walk away. and they think they have done everything. But there needs to be a sort of a broader understanding of the different elements and how they're interconnected. And even if you're trying to help countries walk the data governance journey, there's supposed to be a clear understanding both from whoever is helping and whoever is receiving help, how all those elements are interconnected. It looks like they can't go back, but the whole library analog, if you move it into the data ecosystem, it then makes the whole conversation more comprehensive, both to the client, in this case countries, as well as the development partners who are coming in to help us in that journey. In terms of recommendations, I had mentioned that we need to have a national data policy. In the case of Kenya in particular, we didn't have that. We still don't have it 15 years later. And what that meant is that even if you build the physical infrastructure, the national data portal, there is no incentive for individual ministries to populate it. Because government works. Oops, that is yours. Government works. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is good. It's good they got it back. I'd left out the national statistical offices. Very important, but you realize they sort of do a summary, or they usually come to the table at the end. For example, if you think about doing national census, they do this every 10 or 5 years. And then that data is very useful and can contribute to the data ecosystem. However, you realize that it tends to be sort of after the fact. Secondly, you probably want to build capacity at each department level to continuously populate the data pipeline. So if you're in Ministry of Health, rather than wait for the National Statistics Office to come and every 3 years or every 5 years to give you the nutritional statistics about the population, why don't you have an inbuilt system within the health department that can be able to generate that data on a more continuous basis? So that was, I think, the bit I hadn't mentioned. Let's go to the last slide. Let's go to the recommendations. Thank you. So I had started on this. We need a national data policy and a national data strategy. This allows you to mobilize cross-government support. Because if you don't have this, like we still don't have in Kenya, you have a very good infrastructure, but you have to almost bully the ministries to contribute data to it. But if you have a government-wide policy that this is the way we want to go, you don't need to waste time trying to convince people to contribute to it. You must get the key players, National Statistics Office, Data Protection Authority, civil society, private sector, to be bought into that national data policy and strategy. Each of them should be able to understand their contribution and their role. The last point I was sharing on terms of recommendation is to have a data governance framework. Okay, you need to have a data governance framework. I know at the AU level we have a data policy framework. And we can borrow a lot from there to ensure that we have regional data governance frameworks and country-based data governance frameworks. In practical terms, this means is how do we have an operational body to sustain the data governance agenda? there have been recommendations that data protection authorities could probably be the ones. I have my own reservations. It's very key that data protection authorities are involved because they ensure that personal aspect of that data is protected. But the data governance agenda goes beyond personal data. It includes data sets that may not necessarily be personal, but are useful to building up our development agenda. Of course, they are very important players, but we have others like National Statistics Office. We have other data players I mentioned from private sector, civil society. How do we get them together to be on the same page so that they contribute to the data governance agenda? I think with that, I come to the end and have run out of time. Thank you. Back to you.
So not to say that we're not going to take the question and answers. We rather have one more presenter, and I think we can take them once and for all. Now, thank you so much to Dr. John to present on the behalf of Kenya. Now, looking at, we just started with a country perspective, and now we're moving higher into a regional perspective. And kindly allow me to welcome Sami Trimtek, who's going to connect and also share at a regional level on the data protection policies from IGF. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista. So I'll make my presentation through Zoom, maybe to avoid the problem of pointer. Can you skip Zoom? Yes. So first, I'm very delighted to be with you today for this very good opportunity to share with you IGF activities and mainly the result of a study made by IGF regarding the data protection governance in the Arab region. So IGF is the Arab governmental organization covering the Arab region. It is covering 22 countries. 10 of them are in Africa and 12 are in Asia continent. So first, let me just share a few slides about IGF. So here is our vision. Our vision is to build a smart, secure, and sustainable Arab digital future, the 3S. Our mission is the Zoom, please. Our vision. So our vision is to direct efforts toward achieving digital development that serves the Arab community in the comprehensive and balanced manner through the intelligent integration of smart technology. So our global vision is to build a digital smart future, to build a secure digital future, and to build also sustainable. أنا حطيت على زوم. إذا ممكن تشير على زوم هناك. الزوم هنا. It's already shared.
لأنه في رابط ثاني هو.
ما في إشكال. أوكي. أوكي. So we are a regional organization, governmental. So we have both categories of members. There is countries or officials. And also we have associate members, which are the private sector and also companies that are interested to be part of the journey. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. Here are our most activities and initiatives related to data protection and cybersecurity in the region. First, we are conducting and managing an e-trust network. It's an African region network. We are also the agency which was instructed by the Arab ministries to conduct and to elaborate the Arab Common Strategy of Cybersecurity. So this strategy was elaborated and drafted by ICTU and was adopted by the ministries of ICT of the Arab region this year. In addition, we are conducting every year an annual event on cybersecurity, and at the occasion, we are publishing white books and also some experiences, case studies. In addition, we conducted the Common Data Protection Framework study. It was also one of the instructions of our members. So here I will present you the findings of this study, which was conducted the early 23 and 24. As for the governance of the Arab data protection in the Arab region, in terms of legal texts adopted, we have 15 countries that have already adopted their legal texts in 30 years. Between 2004 and 2009, there is 2, and 2010 to 2019, 5, and between 2020 and 2024, there is 8 countries that have adopted their legal frameworks regarding the digital data protection. In terms of status of laws in the countries, so Egypt and Syria, their legal system are not entered in force. Comoros law passed in 2024 but has not been made public till now. In progress, we have 4 countries that they are working now on their legal framework: Libya, Palestine, Iraq, and Djibouti. Lebanon has drafted a new law this year regarding data protection. Next slide, please. Next slide. In terms of legal system protecting the personal data, there is 5 components that we are finding them in all the studied legal frameworks. The 5 are the principle of protection, the rights of the concerned persons, the obligation of personal data processing responsible, the structures in charge of control and protection, and the last one is the penalties. Next slide. In terms of governing structure, and the protection or control body is the one of the 3 basic components of protection systems, in addition to legal framework and to technical operational measurements. And according to international standards, the independence of this structure is required. So in terms of the states in the Arab countries, so there is countries that they created their dedicated governing structure, such as Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Bahrain. There is some countries that assigned a ministry to these tasks. I can here Lebanon and Oman. And the third possibility was the creation of under another structure or ministry of a body that is in charge of data protection. And Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia have adopted this model. So since the adoption and promulgation of the European General Regulation 2016, the appointment of internal personal data protection has ranked first in the obligation of the data processors. So only Arab countries laws issued after 2016 mentioned this function, namely the countries Bahrain, Egypt, Sultanate of Oman, Jordan, Algeria, and Syria. They mentioned this internal personal data protection officer. The tasks entrusted to this function are multiple, and most important of them is the ensuring of conformity, increasing of internal awareness, and assuring links with the controlling authorities and the individuals concerned by the data processing. The study addressed these measures, and the study made a benchmark between all the countries in terms of data transfer abroad, in terms of how they manage the data transfer abroad, the incident notification, the personal data security, the consent, the principle of consent, the media and transparency, the sensitive data, how they deal with the sensitive data, and the advanced procedures. And this is with regard to there is some countries that they are still adopting the previous legacy practice. The main recommendation of this study was unification of personal data protection systems. So we're working on that. So with our members, we are trying to harmonize regulation in the Arab region to work on the standardization of concepts. The words and the terminology in Arab countries are not the same. So we have to work on the same and unified concepts. The establishment of a technical advisory committee, the accelerating of ratification of draft Arab Convention. There is a project now on the table to work on a digital Arab Convention. So we are through this study, we are motivating our our members to ratify this convention when it will be, of course, adopted. The encouragement of national legislation and the encouragement of Arab countries to join Convention 108 of European Community. And last recommendation was to launch an initiative to establish an Arab association regarding this very big issue. It was my last slide. Thank you very much. And I don't forget to address my very deepest thanks to SMART for the support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sami. I think now we can take questions, comments, recommendations, what you believe should be the best. It could be one either for the Smart Africa perspective, it could be for the Kenyan, or even sharing where the country, wherever you're from, if you have any different policies that you feel like either contradicts or could add to our conversation, you're very much welcome, but also at the regional level. So you're very much welcome. If there's any questions, comments, just also inquire from the technical team. If you could also mention who are you asking the questions to, or if you just a comment as well, you're much welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ntabise Mpula from Lesotho. Mine is a comment, perhaps more than a question, on the establishment of independent data regulators. We have been grappling with this question in my country for the longest time. Our data protection legislation was passed in 2011, but to date, the Information Commissioner has not been established, mainly around the question of how will it be funded. So perhaps others can share experiences in regard to that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I might as well also be honest and say I was fighting with my technical device here. I didn't quite hear whom this was regarded to. Generally? Okay. Do we have I think I see Dr. John, who might have a thought.
Thank you. Not yet a doctor, but working on it. Yeah, with regard to funding, once, for the case of Kenya, once the law was passed in 2019, it took a while before the data commissioner was appointed. And sometimes it's funding issues. Other times, of course, it's the process of appointing can bring, delays because there's quite a lot of interest on who the new data commissioner is going to look like. But I want to believe once government enacts the law, then Treasury should be sort of mandated to provide funding for the same office. In the beginning, the funding will not be enough. Even for our Data Protection Commission office, the funding is still not enough. You will request budgets from Treasury, they'll give you half. And for you to maintain operations or to have an impact, you must work with development partners. I speak for the case of Kenya, where we have gotten into initiatives with our partners, GIZ, World Bank, I think also UK funding, where the government would, because of budget constraints, will meet your operational costs, staff salaries, keep the vehicles running. But when it comes to initiatives that really make an impact, you find you have no funding. So partnership comes in to plug the gap. And that is how we have been operating. That we have baseline funding from government, then we look for additional funding from our partners to make sure that we keep the data protection agenda up and running. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Do we have a different perspective to that or addition? Not to point. Okay. Thank you so much. If you could also introduce with your name as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, team. My name is Raimo Eumba from Namibia. Just to add what I think it was mentioned here, that when we are formulating policies, we are working in silo. And this silo, it was not supposed to be mentioned in terms of only policies, but let us look at the sectors that were supposed to be supporting each other. You are in the ICT sector, trying to formulate a data policy, of which maybe we might also want to have a data center. But we have the financial sector, which was supposed to support you, and also the energy sector maybe. So some of these sectors, they were supposed to collaborate, and then when we are formulating that policy or coming up with a project, it must have a supportive initiative from all the sectors that are involved. What I have seen is the way most people have been seeing that as African, we have good ideas of coming up with new initiatives, but those initiatives are failing because we are working in silo. My input here is just to say, if we can formulate strategies together to say all the sectors that are involved, let them be on board for us to come up with projects. The example is that I'm referring it to that we talk of data center here, and the data, those who are collecting data, like we have mentioned the banks, we might have Ministry of Home Affairs, those one who are providing information. If in that financial year they are not talking of coming up with that project of data, then you will fail, because in their strategy they are not yet ready for that. So my input is just to say, let us make sure that we read through the strategy of other sectors, and then we link it, so that when we are going for the parliamentarian to buy in, we must be talking to each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think indeed this is a great point. Not just to point. I think Coco wants to speak. I also wanted to hear from Maritha, because I know this is something that Smart Africa has been working on. But let me first hear from Kuku from JZ. Not sure if the mic is fading. Hello? Okay, much better.
Hello. So on the issue of national data policy, I just want to add that a national data policy is not a sectorial policy, and we need to understand that clearly. That is where the challenge actually starts from. When we start thinking that a national data policy belongs to the ICT relevant ministry in the country. So that is one thing we need to clear. And then when it comes to bringing in also stakeholders, it is interesting what you mentioned, but it is also not just about the different stakeholders in the public sector, but also bringing in the private sector and civil society. And it's something we are not doing. So for instance, when you work with ICT ministries and you want to convene multi-stakeholder engagement to discuss these policies, the focal persons in the ICT ministries are inviting only reps from government agencies. And that is a bit worrying, because you are talking about data center. We know that especially on the African continent, the government do not even have the financial muscle to build these data centers. But when you are formulating your policies, you don't even invite in the private sector. So these are things we should look at, and I think that once we understand that a national data policy is not a policy for the ICT ministry, but it's a policy for the country, and we go with these multi-stakeholder approaches, then we will ask the right questions, make the right assumptions, and then have the right answers.
So unfortunately, we're actually up to the time that we had been offered in this room. But allow me to kindly also welcome you. We have another training. Pretty much, it could also be a follow-up to this from 4 to 5:30, and it's going to be in workshop 10. So apologies, we're going to take this up to this afternoon. Yes, this afternoon, but workshop 10, not this current one, next door. So thank you so much. Allow me to really thank you so much. Thank you for the time. Thank you for your thoughts and all the recommendations that we just got from the room, and as well as sharing the knowledge that we had from Sami and John, upcoming doctor. Thank you so much.